Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your attention today. For those of you in attendance who don't know me, my name is Kettle-Bergstrand, and today I'm going to be speaking about grief bots, otherwise known as death bots, digital recreations, digital ghosts, and more. But for the context of today, I'm going to stick with grief bots. So, what is a grief bot and why are they an issue? A grief bot is an advanced deepfake created by AI using a deceased individual's personal data, such as texts, images, videos, voice clips, and more, to create a digital avatar or chatbot that will resemble their likeness of the deceased. So, they often cost money to create or to subscribe to the technology, and they're created by AI firms that I refer to as recreation services. Some of these recreation services are known as Project December, Eternity AI, and a plethora more, and they're often sought by those who are grieving a loved one. However, they have the potential to portray false narratives, possibly spreading misinformation, causing reputational harm and exploitation. My favorite example that I love to share is when a young woman asked her grief bot grandma about one of her baking recipes because she just couldn't get it right, and the grief bot said, "Oh no, I used this cooking book," and sent an ad for a cooking book to buy. So there's lots of potential issues here. But currently, after we die, there's no designated keeper of our data. What happens is typically our loved ones call our cell phone carrier company. They send them our death certificate if they need it, and they retrieve what they want off the device, and to the back of a drawer it goes. However, with the emergence of this tech, there is more of an incentive to use their data post-death and invade the privacy of those who are no longer alive to consent. So there's currently no legislation to protect against the concerns of privacy, dignity, copyright, and ethics. The Personal Information Protection and Electronics Documents Act, PIPEDA, fails to protect citizens explicitly post-mortem. So to put this into perspective, I decided to go back to where it all began, Project December, and now seemingly outdated AI engine. So I paid my $10. It then asked some questions about the loved one I'm trying to talk to, like their name, birthday, cause of death, a quote from them, who they were to me. Project December is not so advanced to include text and images yet, but there are technologies that does that. And then I was speaking with my grandma, a simulation of my grandma. It asked what was new with me since we'd last seen each other. I said I was completing my capstone. It then asked about my capstone, and we just got in this ironic conversation about my capstone. So, Project December was only the start. And if that wasn't convincing enough, it's just gotten worse from here. Why should you care? So, as we see here in this wonderful mind map, it isn't just between the user and AI. It's a multifaceted issue with many dimensions impacting many different systems, such as government, legal, healthcare, personal, and it impacts you as a digital asset owner and contributor, your family, the healthcare system, recreation services, legal entities, the public, the media, researchers, insurance companies, enforcement agencies, and more. And if that wasn't enough, there's many more different reasons why you should care. So I want to direct your attention to the impact section, and that will intertwine and relate to the remainder of the chart, and I'll walk you through it. So psychological, it could help with coping, or it could prolong grief. It may impact overburdened systems, such as the healthcare system, due to needing mental health care because of this grief bot that's supposed to help with coping. Ethical, recreation services are exploiting grievers due to lack of protections in place. Privacy and security concerns and the unanswered questions of who owns the digital likeness and digital data of the dead. Can it be used for fraud purposes to make a self-incriminating video despite not having done that while living? Fraud, scams, identity theft, and more. Also, cybersecurity risks. Breaches can expose secrets and sensitive conversations with deceased that may have merit, may not. Legal, since there's a lack of governance, it raises the questions about intellectual property, potential lawsuits. Economic, I've already kind of touched on this, but it exploits vulnerable people and especially marginalized communities. It may also impact the funeral industry as a whole, as it offsets the traditional mourning process. And environmental concerns. As we know, AI use leaves a significant carbon footprint with significant energy and water consumption and e-waste. So there's lots of reasons to care. But why do I care about this? Why did I voluntarily study death for my capstone? Death and Dying, the Western Experience, facilitated by Dr. Jeremy Cohen in my final semester of undergrad here at Mac, is what started it all. After my grandma suddenly passed, I was seeking answers. I did not turn to a grief bot. This course seemed like a perfect opportunity to learn about the history, process, and future of death. Dr. Cohen introduced the idea of transhumanism and the digital immortality in the context of death denial and the future of death. He's also the co-founder of Talk Death website, which I strongly encourage you to visit. And the existing landscape. I also briefly touched on this, but as we know, the existing legislation that we currently have was never created with AI's capability in mind. We're experiencing a significant lag in legislation, and companies like these digital recreation services, they're able to take advantage of that. Bill C-27, otherwise known as the Digital Charter Implementation Act of 2022, would have introduced the Consumer Privacy Protection Act, the CPPA, updating PIPEDA, and introduced the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act, which would have legislated on responsible AI use and held AI firms to standards and regulations. The CPPA would have tackled consumers' rights to disposal and the tricky digital consent concerns, but this legislation died. But only now are there peer-reviewed articles being published about this issue, and the public is beginning to recognize it as a potential issue. Other jurisdictions on a global scale, not much is being done to explicitly address grief bots, but there is work being done on AI and regulation and its use, which could extend grief bots. So the EU AI Act leaves room for future amendments that can navigate this issue. The first legislation of its kind, it's really great, really progressive. Article 63 of France law actually incorporates the concept of digital death to define what becomes of a person's digital data upon death, but the law gives the possibility of defining directives relating to the conservation, erasure, and communication of personal data after death. In New York, I found this one interesting. There's a right to publicity for deceased individuals to protect against the commercial exploitation or unauthorized use. Um, Section 3 of Chapter 304 of the laws of 2020 outlines this. And California has recently introduced the California Delete Act, which is a state law that provides a one-stop shop deletion mechanism for consumers to direct data brokers to delete their personal information. Click of a button. And what can we do? These are some options that I considered that I ultimately decided to not go with. I'll briefly go through them all. Mutual consent requirements. This would require the data donor, so the deceased individual, and the recipient, the person creating the grief bot. They would both have to explicitly consent to using and receiving grief bot technology, as some people were receiving it without consent post-death of their loved one. Classifying grief bots as medical devices. This would hold to clinical trials, rigorous testing, and regulatory compliance standards. So those suffering from prolonged grief disorder may be prescribed this technology, being able to use the technology and access it. I considered banning the use and creating data protection laws and criminal penalties for violations. And I also considered no action, so the status quo. Ultimately decided against them, and I won't spend too much time here. But the only option that I seriously considered was classifying grief bots as medical devices, which would regulate grief bots, require them to undergo rigorous testing, clinical trials, and compliance audits. While it would prevent potential exploitation through subscription services and ads, addressing ethical concerns, it unfortunately did not meet the objectives that I'd said of protecting the privacy of this deceased, which is the number one priority. Other options that were considered but ultimately decided as not being feasible and enforceable, and I found it would encourage jurisdiction hopping or sending the practice underground and even more unregulated. So the status quo would have been the cheapest option in the short term, but high costs for potential litigation, environment, political backlash, and the long-term costs just outweighed the short term. And finally, my recommendation to protect the privacy of Canadians when considering the potential abuse of digital data by grieving individuals and digital recreation services, it's recommended to implement the Opt-out Digital Data Delete Act, similar to California's Delete Act. This would allow individuals to decide pre-death, so similar to organ donation, if they would like to have their digital data deleted at the time of their death or kept. Automatically, data will be deleted, and it would immediately signal to telephone providers to delete the account and the data of the user when notified of their death. So how it would work is Canadians would receive a letter in the mail, or you could possibly do it online. We're working on that aspect if they'd like to keep their data. And if individuals choose to just non-response, their data will be deleted. If they choose to opt out of data deletion, their data will be left untouched. And those who receive it will be the acting authority who can decide what happens to it. So you're pre-consenting. It will be done this way because we expect a low response rate for mail-in or online responses. So this will be the most effective of um, applying to our policy. However, there is more of an incentive for those who are interested in keeping their data to respond. In relation to grief bots, data deletion is the only way to protect dead individuals from being digitally created. Justification, it ensures Canadians can pre-consent to their decision and it's legally enforceable. Feasibility was already discussed in the last slide, but the measurable impacts will be through compliance rates, public engagement, response rate, and stakeholder feedback. While there may be high upfront costs of up to $2 million from research, feedback, lobbying, drafting, proposal, and an estimated 600,000 annually for compliance, which may be partially funded through data broker fees, taking on after the model of the California delete mechanism. There will be long-term benefit from this. Thinking back to all the stakeholders, there's expected to be more backlash in the recreation service industry because this is going to mean less business for them. But however, it's not eliminating all business possibilities like my other options and opening them up to non-compliance fees. And while this may not seem like a top government priority at the moment, I can assure you while technology rapidly advances and more questions are left unanswered surrounding our data post-death and how it may be manipulated, this will be on their political agenda. So thank you for your attention, and I'm open to any questions or feedback.